Hey guys, it's Dave. Welcome back to the channel for another video. I really wasn't planning to make one today, but we've just gotten some pretty sensationalist headlines on a couple articles talking about Rocket Lab and basically implying that they're lying about their chances of getting Neutron launched by the end of the year. And I definitely have some thoughts about this. I really wanted to talk about it and not just, let it lie. I do want to mention, though, I don't want this to become a Rocket Lab only channel. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's probably my favorite company that I do cover in the space industry, and it's going to continue to feature in a lot of my videos. But yeah, I do like to have a good mix, but right now there's just so much going on with Rocket Lab that it seems like there's a lot of Rocket Lab videos. So I will cover anything that I think deserves covering, and I do want to get to, say, another video on the Intuitive Machines lander and that company's stock. I think they really proved themselves with that mission in terms of their capabilities. Obviously not a complete success, but I think it does bear looking into further. Anyway, all that out of the way, today we're going to investigate a couple recent articles and a memo that's been circulating around the government, basically saying Rocket Lab's lying about their Neutron timelines. Let's take a look. So this is the article that's really getting the most attention on this issue from what I can understand, and it cites a congressional memo which says Rocket Lab has misrepresented Neutron launch readiness. Pretty strong words saying that they're basically misrepresenting when they're going to be ready. But this is not actually the first article that is citing this exact same memo. We had one a day or two previously with a little less strong language talking about the same memo, basically saying they won't be ready to launch by year end, without actually accusing them of misrepresenting the situation, at least in this document. So if you do remember, I've mentioned it in many videos now, NSSL program, very important government launch program, tons of massive launch dollars up for grabs. And the new phase is starting to come online towards the end of this year. I've been talking about how important it is for Rocket Lab and basically any launch company to try and secure some of these contracts. So there's two lanes, as I've said previously. There's lane 1 and lane 2. Lane 1 is what Rocket Lab cares about. That's for newer, unproven launchers, less important payloads, and the capacities are a bit lower. They don't have to hit these really tough requirements that lane 2 has to hit. So a lot of companies want to get in basically into the pool of lane 1. So first you have to get into the pool. Then when you get on-ramped into the program, you don't necessarily have any launches guaranteed. That just gives you basically the ability to bid on those launches. It's an important distinction to keep in mind as we continue this article. So some other newcomers, such as Relativity Space, Firefly, and ABL, did not bid on this round of the NSSL, and there is an opportunity to on-ramp into the program annually. So if you don't get into the program, you have to wait all the way until next year, December 15th, in order to get your vehicle on-ramped. That's why it's such a big deal. There's a few requirements to get on-ramped, but one of them is that your rocket has to have a credible path to launching by December 15th when you're kind of applying to get into the pool, which to me is a very vague requirement, and I don't really like the wording very much. I would like it a lot better if you could just get into this pool once you get to orbit and have a successful launch. This weird once annual situation it seems kind of arbitrary and can really hurt some companies. Let's go back to the TechCrunch article, though, that got the most attention. So this is going back to a congressional memo that was viewed by TechCrunch, casting strong doubt on Rocket Lab's claim that its Neutron rocket will be ready for launch in time to meet that crucial deadline from the Space Force to get on-ramped into this program. In light of public reporting and media pressure, Rocket Lab has escalated their campaign to misrepresent their launch readiness in an effort to gain competitive advantage over incumbents and other new entrants by onboarding into NSSL Lane 1 at the first opportunity in 2024. Pretty strong language. Public records and information available to staff confirm that Neutron has no credible path to launch by December 15th, and Rocket Lab declined to comment on the story. So, congressional memos are used to inform congressional officials on particular issues and make recommendations on proposed actions. This memo was written by congressional staffers and circulated on Wednesday to other offices, including Senate Armed Services Committee. And they say that Rocket Lab has repeatedly reassured these staffers or assured these staffers that the company does have a credible path to launch by December 15th. And I just don't like this wording, credible. Like, what is credible? If you put the odds at 30%, okay, there is a path. The path is there. Is it credible? I mean, is 30% credible? I don't know. Is 50% credible? Does it have to be 90% to be credible? Like, what does that mean? Personally, I would put the odds at Neutron launching this year probably below 20%, if I'm being honest. Is that credible? I mean, who can say? I don't know. Anyway, let's continue on because, I just find this a little bit frustrating. Space Systems Command has said that this is the date by which launch providers must be ready to fly in order to qualify for that program, which I was mentioned. These contracts are going to be worth multiple billions of dollars, and as I've said, this is going to include those SDA satellites that Rocket Lab themselves are building, that big $500+ million contract. In the recent earnings call, Peter Beck did note that, providers who don't meet the deadline for this year will be able to bid next year, which is probably what Firefly, ABL, Relativity, and the rest are planning. Well, not next year because Relativity is not looking to fly until maybe 2027, but they'll get on-ramped when they're ready in the next round or the next few rounds. The memo did claim that uncertainties around Archimedes' hot fire tests are the biggest issue, something I've been a little concerned about myself, as you'll be aware if you have watched my previous videos. And, I don't deny that's an issue, but to me, this whole memo just kind of smacks of lobbying and politics, and this is unfortunately the realm that Rocket Lab is now going to have to wade into as they get after those bigger dollars and we get into medium launch as opposed to just small launch. Lobbying is just unfortunately a fact of life, and politics plays a factor. Contributions play factors, people wanting jobs for their home state plays big factors. Just kind of the unfortunate reality of the situation Rocket Lab's going to be in going forward. So beyond those test fires and Neutron themselves being ready, there is actually Virginia Commercial Space Flight Authority is released an RFP for some work themselves, including a locker for equipment that they expect to be completed by November 29th, 2024, which this memo says will not leave enough time for Rocket Lab to do their own launch. Apparently, source selection will begin in the second quarter of this year, and the Lane 1 awards will be announced in the middle of the third quarter, which runs from April to June, so that'll be a pretty exciting time. So, a few things. Obviously, I am a biased individual. I am invested in Rocket Lab. I'm a fan of the company. I'm going to try my best to put that bias aside and pretend I'm just a regular American taxpayer who just wants their tax dollars to be used the most efficiently, and that's all I really care about. I'm a voter, I'm a taxpayer, that's it. So, keeping that in mind, let's talk about a few things. First of all, what happens if Rocket Lab does get on-ramped into this program and then, heaven forbid, Neutron isn't ready? Disaster strikes, right? Like, oh my God, it's a disaster. No. As I said previously, once you get in, that only gives you permission to bid on individual missions. It doesn't give you, a guarantee of a mission or even a certain mission in and of itself. So Neutron gets into the program, their rocket is not ready. That means they won't win those missions when the bidding does come up, and only people who are ready get those missions. As a taxpayer, it really doesn't hurt me. I really don't see how it hurts the Space Force or how it hurts anyone if Rocket Lab does get in and they are not ready. So what situation could arise where people don't want Rocket Lab in this program? The only scenario that anyone really cares is if Rocket Lab gets in and they are ready to go and they do bid on launches and then they beat someone, right? Because the people they beat are incentivized to obviously want to win, be able to charge as much as they can. So the only people who win from this memo, if Rocket Lab does not get on-ramped, are the other competitors. I really don't see this helping out the government or the taxpayer in any way or protecting them in any way. So who are the other bidders? Well, right now, the only people who can bid on lane 1 are the people who are on-ramped into lane 2 because nobody else has gotten there yet. And that means ULA, and that means SpaceX, and the third provider is highly likely to end up being Blue Origin's New Glenn. Now, personally, I watch the space industry, relatively closely. I don't think SpaceX really cares enough to try and lobby to get Rocket Lab blocked from this lane. I feel like they just kind of execute. They let their prices do the talking to try and beat out other competitors. ULA and Blue Origin both do have quite a history of lobbying, however. Not to say SpaceX has never done it, because they did to get into this program originally, but ULA and Blue Origin have more of a history of doing this in terms of aggressively trying to keep away other competitors and use it defensively as opposed to, getting themselves included. Back in 2022, there was an article from Ars Technica talking about ULA and their lobbying. Basically, they were trying to block this whole lane 1, lane 2 approach. They didn't want new competitors. So they drafted a letter which was signed by more than 24 House members encouraging the Space Force to require launch providers to meet all critical mission requirements. This is how phase 2 was, where basically, let's say there's a few missions that are really difficult and you have to have a very capable rocket to hit, but there's tons of other missions in the program that are much easier. You can only bid on those easy programs if your rocket can also achieve the requirements of those hard programs. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me in terms of fostering competition, being good for the taxpayer, being good for the government. So, luckily that did not succeed, but it just goes to show right there ULA lobbying and the close ties they have to U.S. House members who all did sign this document seeking to kind of bar the way for new competitors. Blue Origin obviously has their own history of lawsuits and lobbying. They have good relationships with their own senators, congressmen, politicians, and I don't blame politicians for wanting more money and work to flow into their own districts. Of course, they have to try and do the best they can by their constituents, which means getting companies in their areas big lucrative contracts. So what do you know? Suddenly the requirement changed and the US is now going to procure 2 lunar landers instead of 1. Just another example of what I consider to be lobbying and politics at work. Also, when you think about NSSL lane 2, which is that more difficult lane to get into. Originally, there was only planned to be 2 competitors. Those were won by ULA and SpaceX. Blue Origin missed out. And then, miraculously, down the line, a third competitor was added. And really, the only rocket that has a chance of meeting those requirements is New Glenn. So, I wonder what might have happened there. Anyway, this just annoys me because I do think if Neutron isn't ready and they get into the program, well, big deal. They're not going to get those launches. They'll have to wait till they are ready to get some launches. Who cares? If they don't get in and they start launching in, say, February, which is right after this year's on-ramp closes, then they've got to wait until December 15th again to on-ramp the next time. That's why I really am not a fan of how this is structured. In terms of going back to the article, talking about their allegations, saying that basically Rocket Lab is campaigning in their public statements to try and convince people they can be ready to launch by year end when really there's no chance. Is this true? Are they lying? Well, let's listen to a few clips from Peter Beck on the most recent earnings call when he was asked about Neutron's timeline and what he kind of said to address these questions.
Yeah, look, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a rocket program, right? Right now we have a schedule that closes for a launch by the end of the year. But we've got a lot of testing to get through, and if everything goes well, then everything goes well. If we have some issues and some development issues along the way, whether it be propulsion or other systems, then that will cause us to to reevaluate the schedule. But kind of as it stands today, that's kind of where we're looking at it, and we have we have a schedule that closes. There are some elements that are out of our control, but the way in which we develop a lot of this infrastructure is very highly managed and very very hands-on, and I wouldn't put too much credence in particular RFPs that went out with respect to some of those dates. I mean, I think we'll stand on our own record of developing launch pads in pretty short timeline. So like I say, I wouldn't put too much weight on anything like that. I would watch the concrete go down and watch us get us there. And then even on the equipment vaults, it's nice to have the equipment in a vault, but it doesn't necessarily need to be in a vault.
So, I mean, I think he's being pretty clear here. So he's not saying they for sure are going to make it. Basically what he's been saying, and this has kind of been the line they've been saying since the beginning. They have a schedule. If everything goes perfectly, it can happen. Does that mean it will happen? They can't say for sure. I mean, it's a rocket program. Rocket programs get delayed all the time. By the way, talking about rocket program delays, let's go back to Phase 2 of NSSL, because that was awarded back in 2020. And ULA was one of the big winners for Phase 2. And they were developing their Vulcan rocket and bidding that in order to get into Phase 2 to get these big contracts. This is back in 2020. And Vulcan just finally launched in 2024. So that's 4 years late and way after they were picked for this program. I mean, can you say hypocrisy? It took them forever to be able to launch. They ended up getting into it. They lost launches to SpaceX because Vulcan wasn't ready. And now they're trying to block other competitors saying, oh, look, their rocket isn't ready. To me, this is just ridiculous. Now, I don't know for sure if this is due to ULA lobbying, Blue Origin lobbying. To me, it seems likely, and which one is it? The thing is, Blue Origin is looking more and more likely like they're going to own ULA very soon. So the distinction almost doesn't even matter at this point. They're very soon going to be the same entity, most likely. And talk about a merger of two titans of lobbying. That'll be an interesting one. But yeah, I just thought it was crazy that, ULA was so late themselves on Phase 2, barely having Vulcan ready for Phase 3, and here they potentially could be trying to block someone else from getting in for the same reasons of being late that, they encountered themselves to a much, much greater degree. Anyway, that's kind of what I think. I think Peter's a pretty genuine guy. Of course, Rocket Lab wants to get in. Of course, if they think maybe they launch in February, March, maybe it would make sense to them to say, you know what, I think we still have a credible path to launching by the end of the year, by December 15th. I think any company would say that given the circumstances. What is credible? I don't know. And, delays happen. To me, I don't like how this on-ramping system is structured. I think it's great that they're allowing new entrants in, like Rocket Lab and the rest, and I like this two-lane approach. I just wish the on-ramping was a little different, and I wish the credible path was you know, a little bit more certain and not up for interpretation. So I don't think Rocket Lab is misrepresenting themselves and misrepresenting Neutron. Maybe I'm wrong on this. If it turns out that they're like a full year, maybe 2 years late on Neutron launching, I'll fully admit it. I was wrong. Like, if they're 2 years late on launching Neutron, then clearly at this point right now, there's no credible path to get to launch by December 15th. At least that's how I feel. So we'll bookmark this. We'll see when Neutron does launch. If it's, you know, before, if it's, say, after Q1 or Q2 next year, I was probably wrong. Maybe they were misrepresenting the situation, or maybe things just went worse than they expected. I mean, that's a fine line, right? It's pretty tough. So not a fan of this memo. We'll see what happens with NSSL Phase 3 and the contract awards. If Neutron doesn't get ready and doesn't get in this time around, they should be able to get in next time around and hopefully get some launches under that program. Let me know how you feel about this in the comments down below. I think as a final thought, what's clear to me here is that they're, you know, getting into the big leagues now, where it's not just about what you can do, it's also about the connections and the lobbying and all the rest. And that's just a world they're going to have to live in as Neutron starts to compete with the likes of, say, a Vulcan, a Falcon 9, and all the rest. I hope you guys have a great day. If you enjoyed this video, please do like and subscribe. Every new subscriber really helps out. Let me know how you feel about this in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye for now.